I was standing by the drinks table watching kids chase bubbles across the yard when I heard my sister say, "Don't let her touch the cake. She's dirty." She didn't whisper. She didn't even look ashamed. She was talking about my daughter. Before I could process the sting of that sentence, I heard something worse. My mother laughed. Not loud, just this tight little chuckle that sounded like shame. Then she said, "Just like her mother was." That one hit me in the chest. I felt my face go hot, my stomach twisted. I could see Lila just a few feet away humming to herself while drawing with sidewalk chalk. She hadn't heard them. At least I hoped she hadn't. And I just stood there. I didn't defend her. I didn't defend myself. I froze. I wanted to say something. Anything. But when you've spent years being the family disappointment, silence becomes a reflex. I told myself I wouldn't cry. I hadn't cried in front of my mother in years, and I wasn't about to start at a child's birthday party. I gripped the paper plate in my hand so tightly that it bent in half. My mouth was dry, my jaw was clenched. Still, I said nothing. The kids screamed in delight as Camille, my sister, called them over to the bounce house. Everything was bright, cheerful, filtered in pastels and party music. But inside, I felt like a cracked plate someone had placed back on the table and hoped no one would notice. Then I saw Lila walk toward the gift table. She was holding something in both hands. It was wrapped in purple paper with a gold ribbon, her idea. She had made something special for her cousin Amara, the birthday girl. She placed it gently on the table, then turned around and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I made something for her too. Mom said it might change everything." My breath caught. People turned. Camille narrowed her eyes. My mother froze. Lila looked so calm, so proud. 7 years old, tiny for her age, wearing the blue sundress she insisted on picking out herself that morning. She stood there in front of everyone like she had something important to say. And she did. Because what was inside that box left every single person at that party in complete silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. It started with an insult, but it ended with something I never expected. Truth, kindness, and a little girl who reminded a room full of adults what grace really looks like. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in Austin, the kind where the air smells like sunscreen and grass, and the sound of kids laughing feels like it should mean something good. Camille had gone all out for Amara's 8th birthday. Her backyard looked like a Pinterest board. Balloon arches, glittery banners, unicorn-shaped cookies, a cotton candy machine spinning non-stop. She always did things like that. My sister lived for appearances. Everything had to look effortless, like her life was perfect and untouched by anything unpleasant. That included me. I stayed near the edge of the yard, holding a lemonade and watching Lila from a distance. She was coloring a giant chalk rainbow on the pavement with 2 other girls who barely acknowledged her. Lila didn't seem to mind. She hummed as she drew, her tiny fingers streaked with pastel dust. I kept telling myself we were only here for a couple of hours, long enough for Lila to hand over the gift we had worked on together, long enough to show my face and keep the peace. Long enough to remind Camille that no matter how hard she tried, I wasn't going to disappear. 3 years ago, I walked out of a marriage that nearly broke me. My husband, Eric, had a way of making me feel invisible. When I finally left, the fallout wasn't just divorce papers, it was whispers. It was family dinners I stopped being invited to. It was my mother saying, "Well, some people just don't try hard enough to keep a family together." From the beginning, Camille took his side. She said I was being dramatic, that I was throwing away a good man because I couldn't handle adult life. She was furious when I refused to move back home, furious when I said no to going to church with her again, furious when I said I didn't want to explain myself anymore. So when the birthday invitation came, I almost tossed it. But Lila saw it first. She lit up when she read it out loud. "Amara wants me at her party, Mommy." And just like that, I was putting the date in my phone, ironing a dress for Lila, and making a handmade gift with her at the kitchen table. Layla had spent 2 nights painting a small wooden box she picked out at the craft store. She glued on tiny rhinestones, wrote Amara's name in gold marker, and asked if we could print out a picture to put inside. "Make it special," she said. "Something she'll remember forever." I didn't know whether to smile or cry. At the party, Camille barely greeted me. She waved from across the yard like I was a distant cousin she barely knew. Lorraine, our mother, offered me a glass of iced tea but didn't ask how I was. She looked over my shoulder, scanning the guests like she was searching for someone more important to talk to. I had grown used to that. The cold politeness, the forced smiles, the way they pretended I wasn't standing right there unless I was doing something wrong. Lila didn't notice any of it, or maybe she did, and just decided it didn't matter. She was focused on making sure her gift didn't get crushed in the bag we brought, focused on finding the right moment to give it to Amara. I admired her for that. She was kind in ways I hadn't taught her, brave in ways I was still learning to be. She didn't carry the weight of the things I had lived through, not yet. And maybe that's why what happened next mattered so much. Because when you grow up in a family that only sees your flaws, you start to believe them. When your sister is the golden child and your mother makes excuses for cruelty, you start to shrink. And when your daughter stands up in a moment where you couldn't, it forces you to reckon with everything you've spent years avoiding. I didn't know that yet. I was still trying to survive the day without breaking down, still pretending I was fine, still telling myself that showing up was enough. But my silence was about to be interrupted, and it was going to come from the smallest person in that yard. The one who believed that kindness could still change something, maybe even everything. Lila had just finished her rainbow. She stood up, brushed the chalk dust off her dress, and skipped over to the dessert table. She wasn't even thinking about the cake, just the way kids float toward sugar like it's magic. The frosting was a swirl of pink and white, thick and glossy, with tiny gold stars on top. It looked too perfect to touch, and maybe that was the point. Camille always made things look untouchable. Lila reached out to point at one of the cupcakes, probably just trying to figure out which one she wanted when the time came. That's when I heard it. Camille, standing beside my mother, tilted her head toward Lila and said, "Don't let her touch the cake. She's dirty." The sentence was quiet, but it cut like glass, sharp, careless, confident. I turned my head slowly. Camille was sipping from a tall glass with a lemon wedge, her other hand resting on her hip. She said it like she was talking about some stranger's unruly child, not her own niece. My mother didn't flinch. She laughed, just a soft, bitter puff of air, and added, "Just like her mother was." That was the moment I felt myself leave my own body. I heard the words. I knew what they meant, but I couldn't move. It was like my brain had split in two. One part of me wanted to scream and throw something. The other just stood there, frozen, because this wasn't new. This was just the first time they'd said it loud enough for me to hear. Camille had always found subtle ways to shame me. She'd correct the way I spoke, suggest that Lila might be happier in a more structured home, and tell people I was going through a hard phase. She used concern like a weapon. But this wasn't concern. This was cruelty. And my mother, Lorraine, just co-signed it with a laugh. I thought of all the times she called my divorce a failure, all the times she reminded me I didn't finish college, all the times she said I had wasted my potential. Now she was passing that shame down to my daughter, like it was part of some family inheritance. I looked at Lila. She was still standing by the dessert table, hands folded in front of her. She wasn't reaching anymore, just watching the cake, quiet and still. I didn't know if she'd heard them. I didn't know if she even understood. But something in her posture shifted, like she felt the energy change in the air. I wanted to walk over and grab her, pack our things, and leave. I wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her none of it was true, that she was clean and kind and beautiful and perfect. But I didn't move. I just stood there, my fists clenched, my heart racing, every instinct screaming to do something. I thought about all the times I had swallowed words like this to keep the peace, every family dinner where I sat in silence, every birthday or holiday I attended just to prove I was still part of them, even when they made it clear I wasn't. And now it was happening to my daughter. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they just didn't care. That was the worst part. The other parents were chatting, the kids were laughing, and the music was still playing. The world didn't stop because my family decided to humiliate me again. It just kept going. I started walking toward Lila. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through something thick and invisible. Before I could reach her, she turned and walked away from the dessert table. Her little sandals pattered across the stone patio, heading straight for the gift table. She held something small in her hands, the purple box we had made together. She climbed up on her tiptoes and placed it carefully among the brightly wrapped presents. Then she turned around. Her voice was soft but clear. "I made something for her, too. Mom said it might change everything." Everyone stopped. I felt every pair of eyes shift toward her. Camille froze. Lorraine blinked slowly, like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. I didn't know what Lila meant by those words. I hadn't told her to say that, but I knew the moment wasn't about me anymore. It was about her, about what she was choosing to do, right in the middle of people who had already decided who she was. And I knew something was about to happen, something that might finally break this family open in a way that couldn't be ignored anymore. When Lila spoke, it was like the air shifted. I made something for her, too. Mom said it might change everything. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was full of certainty, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. She stood there in her blue sundress with chalk still on her fingers and sunlight catching the glitter on her hair clip. The backyard, so full of color and noise a moment ago, felt suddenly quiet. People stopped mid-sentence. A few turned to look. Camille's hand paused around her wine glass. Lorraine leaned forward slightly, like she didn't trust what she had just heard. I felt a pressure in my chest that wasn't fear. It was something closer to awe. The gift was small, a purple box with golden ribbon, nothing that stood out among the glossy bags and store-bought wrapping paper. But Lila had made it with such care. She had asked to paint it herself. She chose purple because Amara likes pretty colors, and gold because it looks like something you keep secrets in. That box wasn't just a gift, it was a piece of Lila's heart, and now it sat among the others, unassuming but powerful, waiting to be seen. Camille walked over slowly, her smile tight, her tone strained. "What's in the box, sweetheart?" she asked, like she already expected it to be something embarrassing or naive. Lila looked up at her and said, "It's for Amara." "Can she open it now?" Camille glanced toward our mother, who gave a half nod and said, "Well, it's her party." Amara came forward, bouncing a little with excitement, her unicorn headband slightly crooked. She tore off the ribbon, opened the lid, and stared inside. Then she pulled out a small photograph. It was faded a bit, but still clear enough to see. 2 little girls, Camille and me, sitting in our grandparents' backyard covered in chocolate frosting. We were laughing, arms around each other, grinning like nothing in the world could touch us. It was one of the only photos I had of us before everything changed, before Camille started calling me messy, before my mother decided I wasn't enough, before everything got complicated. Amara held it up. "That's you, Mommy." Camille stared at it without speaking. Then Lila reached into the box and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Amara, who read it aloud slowly. "My mom says being a little messy doesn't make you dirty. It means you're having fun. I hope we can have fun, too." Amara looked over at Lila and smiled wide. "I love it," she said and hugged her. I felt my eyes burn, but I held back the tears. Everyone around us was watching. Some smiled, a few murmured quietly. I saw one of the other moms raise her eyebrows at Camille. A man I didn't recognize gave a small nod in my direction, like he understood something unspoken. Lorraine stood still. Her arms were crossed, but her mouth had softened. Her gaze flicked between the photo and Lila, like something was unraveling in her mind. Camille cleared her throat and said, "That's from a long time ago." Her voice was thinner now. She picked up the photo again and studied it like she didn't remember it being taken. I finally stepped forward. My hands were shaking, but I didn't hide them. I walked up beside Lila and rested my hand gently on her shoulder. "She found it while we were looking for art supplies," I said. "She wanted to include something real, something honest." Camille looked at me like she was trying to decide whether to be angry or ashamed. I didn't care which. "This party's perfect," I added, "but I think the gift she brought is what made it beautiful." Lila beamed. Amara reached for her hand, and the 2 of them ran off toward the bounce house like nothing unusual had happened. But something had. The story I had been living inside for years was starting to crack open. For so long, I thought I had to tiptoe around their judgment. that staying quiet was the only way to keep the peace. But my daughter didn't tiptoe. She walked right through their silence and filled it with truth. She didn't defend herself with anger or blame. She chose grace. She chose to remind them who we really were, before the shame and the labels. In that moment, I stopped feeling like I had to earn a place at the table. I had brought someone into this world who already knew her worth and wasn't afraid to share it. After the photo and note, something shifted, not just in the air, but in the people. The party kept moving, the music, the laughter, the cotton candy spinning behind the snack table. But the energy had changed. The adults weren't talking as loudly. The other parents gave me longer glances, softer ones. Camille stood beside the gift table, still holding the photo like it was a foreign object. She hadn't said much. She just kept looking at that image of us as children, sitting in the grass, our faces sticky with chocolate frosting. There was no bitterness in that photo, no walls. Just two sisters full of joy, long before life sorted one of us into acceptable and the other into disappointment. I watched her turn the picture over, probably searching for a date or clue about where I'd gotten it. She wouldn't find one. I had kept it tucked inside a box in my bedroom drawer for years, hidden away because it reminded me of a time when I believed my family would always love me unconditionally. Amara, still glowing from the gift, ran off to join Lila at the craft table. I stayed close, unsure what to expect. Camille set the photo back inside the box, gently like it was something fragile. Then she looked at me, really looked at me. "I don't remember that day," she said quietly. I nodded. "I do." There was a long pause. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something else, then stopped. I waited. I wasn't going to fill the silence for her, not this time. "You kept it," she finally said, glancing down. "It was one of the last times I remember us being happy together," I said, "before we started being compared to each other, before I became the one who always got it wrong." She swallowed hard, her gaze flicking toward the girls. "She's sweet. Lila. She's brave," I said. "You may not have meant to hurt her, but you did." Camille's mouth tightened. For a second, I thought she was going to deny it, but instead she looked down and nodded. Then my mother approached. Lorraine rarely showed emotion unless it was disapproval or pride, and she had never aimed much of either in my direction. She looked at the box, at Camille, at me. "I was wrong to laugh," she said. The words sounded strange coming from her. Not warm, not sentimental, just plain and almost uncomfortable. But they were more than I had ever expected to hear from her. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready to forgive with a single sentence, but I could acknowledge the crack in the wall. Lila and Amara came running back over, their arms full of stickers and glitter glue. "We're going to decorate the photo box," Lila said, beaming. "Amara wants to keep the picture inside forever." I smiled. "That sounds perfect." Camille knelt down beside them and touched the box gently. "Can I help?" she asked. Lila looked up at me as if to ask if it was okay. I nodded. She turned back to Camille and handed her a glue stick. "We're putting butterflies on it," she said, "because they remind me of change." Camille didn't say anything, but her eyes shimmered. She began placing tiny gold butterflies around the photo, her movements careful, almost reverent. Lorraine stood behind her, watching. She didn't join in. That wasn't who she was. But she stayed there, and that was enough. In that moment, I felt something loosen inside me. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I wasn't invisible anymore. Lila had opened a door I hadn't dared touch. She had reminded them of a version of me they had forgotten, or maybe one they never tried to see in the first place. She did it without blame, without bitterness, and without asking for anything in return. Just honesty. Just love. Watching her press stickers onto that box, I realized she wasn't just trying to change how they saw her. She was changing how I saw myself. Not as the failure in the family, not as the one who always had to prove something, but as a mother who raised a girl strong enough to tell the truth with kindness. And that changed everything. We didn't stay much longer. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting long golden lines across the yard. I gathered Lila's things while she and Amara hugged goodbye. Camille offered us a small smile as we left, not forced or tight this time, but cautious, like someone learning how to be real again. I buckled Lila into her seat and slid behind the wheel. We sat in quiet for a moment, not the kind that feels tense, but the kind that wraps around you like a soft blanket. Lila leaned back and looked out the window, the purple box now resting on her lap. "Do you think she liked it?" she asked. "I think she'll never forget it," I said. She smiled and pulled one of the butterfly stickers from her pocket. She pressed it onto her dress and said, "I think it really did change something." She wasn't wrong. That night, after she was asleep, I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand. I stared at it for a long time before opening the photo app. I scrolled through old pictures of Lila painting at the kitchen table, of us baking cookies, of our tiny apartment full of mismatched furniture and color. I thought about how many times I had felt ashamed of not having more, how often I avoided family events so I wouldn't have to explain my life or shrink myself just to fit in. But today, I hadn't shrunk. I had watched my daughter walk straight into a space full of quiet judgment and offer something beautiful, not to defend herself, but to connect. She gave the one thing our family had been avoiding for years: vulnerability. And she did it without apology. The next day, I got a text from Camille. It was short. "Thank you for coming. Lila's gift meant a lot to Amara. I'm sorry for what I said." I read it 3 times before responding. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. But I wrote back, "I appreciate that. Lila's happy Amara liked the box." A few days later, Lorraine called. Her voice was less polished than usual. She asked about Lila's school projects and mentioned that she still had the photo saved on her phone now. Then, almost awkwardly, she said, "You've done a good job with her. She's a strong little girl." I wanted to say she had to be, but I didn't. I just said, "Thank you." It was the first time she'd complimented my parenting without a backhanded comment or suggestion. I don't expect my family to change overnight, but I no longer believe their silence or coldness is a reflection of my worth. For years, I let their distance convince me that I was failing, that I was the one who didn't measure up. But I'm not here to measure up. I'm here to raise a daughter who knows her value even when others try to strip it away, and that's exactly what I've done. Lila taught me that healing isn't loud. It's not dramatic. Sometimes it's a child holding out a box with a photo and a message that says, "I see you. I still believe in good things." She didn't just remind our family of who I used to be, she showed them who she is and who I've become. Now, when I walk into a room with my daughter, I no longer hope for quiet tolerance. I walk in knowing we belong there, not because we've earned anyone's approval, but because love, kindness, and truth make space even in the coldest places. I used to wonder how to fix what was broken between me and my family. I thought I needed to explain myself better or become more like them. But what Lila showed me is that we don't need to explain ourselves to people who never tried to understand us. We just need to keep showing up, living fully, and choosing grace over fear. That day at the party didn't end with a big apology or dramatic reconciliation, but it did end with something better, a beginning. Lila didn't change everything in one afternoon, but she opened a door, and she held it open long enough for the rest of us to walk through it. And I did. Sometimes it takes a child to remind us what adults have forgotten, that kindness is a form of courage, and truth doesn't have to come with anger. My daughter didn't raise her voice. She didn't point fingers. She just told the truth in the simplest, most beautiful way. And in doing that, she gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Not just in her, but in myself. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt overlooked, judged, or underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you most, I hope you know this: you are not alone. And sometimes, the quietest moments carry the loudest strength. If you found something real in this story, please like the video to help others see it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment where a child taught you something powerful? I read every single one, and your stories matter too. And if you want more real, raw human stories like this, subscribe to the channel. This space is for all of us who are still learning, still healing, and still showing up. Thanks for watching. And thank you, Lila, for reminding me that quiet bravery can change everything.